Welcome or welcome back. It's your local indie production enthusiast, and today we're talking about the amazing digital circus. If you don't know how my video works, I have a list of things I want to talk about, and I ramble on, I say whatever comes to mind, and I make very long videos because of that. If you don't like this format, go somewhere else, because this is how I make every video, okay? I don't have the mind to script a video, and since I don't talk of like very serious situation, like yeah, I think animation shows, internet drama can be serious, but I don't talk about stuff like grooming, for example. So I don't feel the need to script an entire video. Plus, I feel like I talk well enough, hopefully. But yeah, again, if you don't like this format, change video, because this is how I do every video. To start off, okay, I once made a video very long ago, like the first video that became somewhat relevant, that people watched kind of, was about Glitch. And it was about Knights of Guinevere and all the controversy regarding Data Terrace. In that video, I still remember, I mentioned that a lot of women creators got shut on for creating stuff. And I also remember I mentioned that the only person, the only woman creator currently at the time that was not being shut on was Goose. Guess I shouldn't have said that because, yeah. Starting from Gooseworks before talking about the Amazing Digital Circus finale or the Amazing Digital Circus as a whole, I don't really, okay, like, educate me if I say anything wrong, because so far I haven't seen anything actually controversial about Gooseworks, because the things that I've seen are either personal preferences that I don't think should be policed by the Twitter or TikTok community. Like, for example, I saw people bring up that Gooseworks is into fictional incest, which I don't see anything wrong with. Like, I may not engage with it, but you do you. Like, it's as complicated as that. Same thing with people saying that Gooseworks has a forced feminization fetish. Why would I care, right? Why would I care what people do to get off, right? I don't see a problem with that. The other controversies that I've seen are usually sustained by Twitter posts that are like, oh, by the way, I love abusing women. Like, I, yeah, you can say it's a joke in bad taste. You can say it's not funny. But saying that Gooseworks genuinely likes abusing women because she made a tweet saying, I love abusing women, by the way. The same thing with, I'm a racist, by the way, which is not a tweet that I actually saw, but people told me that it's a tweet that existed at one point. I don't know if it still exists, honestly. I am not so obsessed with the situation that I go like scrolling down on Gooseworks' Twitter account or Blue Sky account to find everything that she ever said in her whole life. I'm not that obsessed, right? But apparently that was a tweet that existed. Maybe it doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, you can say it's a joke in bad taste. You shouldn't make those jokes, especially if you're a white person and your joke is, by the way, I'm a racist. Like, yeah, it's in bad taste. But drawing the conclusion that a person is racist because they made a joke tweet saying, by the way, I'm racist, it's, I don't know, in my opinion, it's just kind of dumb. It's like me saying, oh, by the way, I hate masked lesbians. It's a joke, right? Like, it's just a joke, okay? Because at the end of the day, these three words that I said for, I'm sorry, I have dyslexia, don't really encapsulate my whole like ideal, my morals and stuff like that. Whenever people bring up Gooseworks being racist, especially, and again, educate me on this because I haven't seen stuff for myself, but whenever people bring it up and I ask for like, why are you saying this? I never received actual proof aside from the fact that she apparently once had this tweet saying, I'm a racist, by the way. And apparently the fact that she works with people that had racist accusation, which was like Ashley and Michael Kovac, Nichols, I think, and Michael Kovac, which in a stream, like the whole debacle that I'm not going to talk about simply because I am white and I cannot really have an opinion on it. I can't say, oh yeah, it was 100 years ago, so you shouldn't care anymore. And I can't say you should never, ever think of excusing them because I am not part of the group that was offended. I'm a white Italian. I don't have that right. But again, working with someone that was racist 10 years ago, was it 10 years ago? I don't know. Like, you can't know. Like, for what we know, Gooseworks may never have known that Ashley and Michael said this thing, right? And I don't even think that Gooseworks was responsible for the casting, okay? So I really, like, yeah, sometimes you're gonna work with people that don't share your same ideas or your same morals, but you just have to work with them as long as you have, especially in voice acting, and then you can forget about them, especially if they're like really bad people. If you need a job, you need a job, right? If there is anything that I'm missing from this situation, I would like to be educated, be respectful, because I don't deal with people that just accuse without really giving proof or giving like explanation. We're both adults. We can discuss in an adult manner without like throwing accusations without proof. Now, I debated whether or not to make this whole past segment simply because I've seen like the situation with Funky Frog Bait that to this day I don't really know what the fuck happened. Okay, I keep seeing like their apology. I don't know if Frankie Frog Bait uses Stay Down because I don't really follow them. I think I saw like 2 videos of theirs. But either way, like I keep seeing the apology. I still haven't understood what Funky Frog Bait actually did. Either way, in that situation as well, I don't have a say in it because once again, I am fucking white. With all this said and like all this preamble, I think we can actually start talking about the show. The first thing on my list is the bad writing of the finale, which is like a very broad subject, but I want to talk about it broadly, for like at the start, and then I'm gonna go more in details on some things that I've seen people talk about. Let's start with the fact that something can be well written and you can still not like it, right? You are not forced by anyone to like something that is well written, but you still have to recognize that thing is well written. The same thing goes for liking something that is badly written. You can still like it. You have to recognize that it's badly written. I think I made this example already, but for example, I like The House on the Cerulean Sea. I know that objectively is not the best written book that ever existed. It's pretty bad in some instances. I still like it, and I can't really do much about it. I recognize that the book is not well written. It's still one of my comfort books. Same goes for, I don't know, I didn't really like Joker, but I can recognize that it was a very well written movie and I really liked the cinematography of it. I still didn't like the movie and I would never ever in my life rewatch Joker. With this said, I think The Amazing Digital Circus finale was well written, and I think the whole show was well written enough. There were ups and downs, okay? I'm not saying that it's like the best show that could ever possibly have been, right? But I think it was not bad, especially considering that Gooseworks never worked on a show so big before. And we have to remember that everyone's first creation is almost never their best creation. I think that creators in general, whether it be writers, animators, I don't know, movie makers, should not be treated badly because their first work was not great. Because nobody's first published work of any kind is almost ever great. Of course, there are situations in which the first, like the debut product of someone is very good and were very well received. For example, The Backrooms, as far as I know, was very well received, even though it was the first movie that I don't remember, like I don't actually think I know the guy's name, but it was his debut. Either way, again, first show from Gooseworks, it can be, mid at times, but I think overall it's a good show, and I think the finale in particular was good. What do we mean by badly written? It's complicated, okay? Because everyone will say that something specific makes a show badly written. For example, someone can say that a bad pacing makes something badly written. Someone can say that underdeveloped character makes something badly written. Now, speaking of pacing, I personally thought that in the finale the pacing was a bit off, and I would have loved to have at least one more episode before the finale to better explore, like, before Jack subtracting. I think that would have been good. But we also have to remember again that Glitch is an indie production studio, and they can't often make like very long shows because they're not a multimillionaire company. Like, they're still indie. They have to maintain themselves on merch basically, and maybe donation. I don't know if they do that. So of course, like, and animation takes a lot of time in like big studios. So imagine that, but in a indie studio that doesn't have the same resources of like Disney, for example, Prime Video and stuff like that. So of course they couldn't have like a very long show. With that said, I still think the pacing was a bit off in the first, like, not half. I'm not sure how long the before abstraction took, but I think that part was a bit off in pacing. From Jack's abstraction to the final moments, I guess, I think it was better handled. I think the pacing slowed down, and that helped make things more digestible in a way. My main problem, not only because of course I have little nitpicks, but my main problem with the finale was the pacing. And as you know from other videos, if you watched other videos, I have an issue with pacing. Like, if something is not well paced, my brain just cannot, like, it's something that really bothers me for like, I don't understand the reason, because I know like other people didn't really care about the pacing that much, but me personally, I cannot stand things that are weirdly paced. Not necessarily badly paced, but when the pace is weird, my brain just kind of stops working. Now, on to, like, I don't know, this is like a subcategory of the bad writing, which is the underdevelopment of some characters. I'm sorry, but I cannot take this criticism seriously more often than not, because like, the show has two main characters, which are Pomni and Jax, right? Of course, the other characters are not gonna get as much screen time as Pomni and Jax, who are the main characters. And when people say, oh, Ragatha is underdeveloped, Gangle is underdeveloped, Subo, Kinger, Kane, Babo, I can't fully take them seriously, because number one, I don't think that's completely true. And number two, they're still like secondary characters. They're not the protagonists of the show. I can be a bit lenient when people say this thing, because if you watched as the show was coming out, of course you were waiting a long time between episodes. And that meant that everyone created a narrative in their head that, of course, was never gonna get fulfilled in full, right? Again, I can be lenient, but if you rewatch the show from start to finish, I'm not saying in one sitting, but let's say in the span of a week, for example, even in the span of a 1 day, in 9 days, you would understand, like, you can clearly see that the show starts with Pomni as the clear protagonist and an ensemble of characters, and then slowly Jax kind of races to the top of this ensemble, and by episode 5, I guess, it's pretty obvious that he's a main character next to Pomni. I think people, since they had to wait so long between episodes, expected the show to be an ensemble of characters and Pomni, which was gonna be the protagonist, and every character would be explored in the same way, which is not what happened. Again, I can understand this, but at the same time, I can't, because like storytelling works because you have main characters, secondary characters, background characters. You can't expect every character to have the same importance and to like their backstory and their story in general to be explored as much as the main character. For example, if we take Gravity Falls, right? We can't really be mad because Wendy's backstory or Wendy's character was not as in-depth as Dipper's, because Wendy is a secondary character, Dipper is a main character. Same goes with, I don't know, Jax and Subal. Jax is a main character, Subal is a secondary character. With this said, I still think that all the characters were well explored, okay? I especially when it comes to Ragatha, I don't understand people saying that she's underdeveloped, because among all the ensemble characters, she's the one that we know most about. We know that her mother was abusive. We know what job she did, what hobby she had, what kind of life she lived. We know a lot about who Ragatha was. I don't remember her like canon name outside of the circus, but we know a lot of who she was as a person. The person that I think we know less about is probably Subal, because even Gangle we know a bit more. We know again what kind of school she used to, like, she did and then dropped out of, what kind of job, what kind of passion, what kind of life, more or less. Subal is the one that we know less about. Kinger, again, I think we know a lot about Kinger. For secondary characters, they're, in my opinion, pretty well explored. We know a lot about them, actually. And speaking of characters, underdeveloped, stuff like that, I really want to focus for a moment on Gangle specifically, because I think the way that her abuse was handled was pretty well written, in my opinion. I think that the finale it was really impactful to me as someone that was abused and had the person that abused them die. Because when Jax dies, Gangle can't really cry about it, like, because at the end of the day, your abuser died and you feel relieved for it because they made your life hell. After everything kind of settled down, Gangle finally cries about it, and that whole small arc, I guess, impacted me in a way. And even the feeling of feeling guilty for not feeling sorry for someone that died, like, it doesn't make you a bad person, but it makes you feel like a bad person because someone died, and you like, the main emotion that you feel is relief because this person made your life hell. And as I said, I had someone that was abusive to me die, and it's hard to, number one, talk about, because if you say like, I'm happy or like I'm relieved that someone that made my life hell died, maybe other people will say, yeah, that makes sense, that person ruined your life, so of course you're happy that that person died. But you yourself, at least that happened to me, you yourself feel guilty, because why would you be happy? Like, are you a bad person that you feel relief for someone else dying? That's what bad people do, right? But it's not true because at the end of the day, it's normal to feel safer when someone that was dangerous to you died. I think the whole arc was handled pretty well. I really liked it. And that's one of the reasons I don't really like when people use Gangle as someone that is underdeveloped, because while she is often not forgotten, but like ignored by the narrative, I think that's part of her character. She is someone that is very reserved, shy. She doesn't really like to share her interests with other people until Subal comes along and like starts bringing her out. She, like, the only person that she really talks to is her abuser. So of course, like, she as a character gets put not even in the background. Sometimes she's not even there, right? I think it's part of her character not being there, or like being disregarded by the whole narrative. we're getting to the juicy part of this video, and the part that kind of made me want to make this video, and also the part I feel like people are gonna be most unhappy about, because we're talking about trans Jax. Me personally, I believe Jax was trans before the finale. I think I started thinking she may be trans, or that was what it was alluding to in episode 5 or 6. I don't remember. The one where she is put in a maid dress, okay? That was the episode that I thought, this is a bit of an overreaction for someone that was just put in a maid dress, right? And that was when I started thinking that Jax could be trans. But also, I wasn't sure if they were gonna explore that, so I didn't really talk much about it. Before episode 9, I'm not gonna say convinced, because again, I wasn't sure if they were gonna explore that part of her character, but in my head, Jax was already a trans woman, okay? Then episode 9 happened, and it was so obvious to me. Like, as I was watching it, I kept thinking, she is trans. She is obviously, so fucking obviously trans. Crazy choice of song. To me, saying that episode 9 did not make it obvious that Jax was trans is like saying that I saw that TV Glow could be interpreted as anything but a trans allegory. You can say that it was explored in an odd way, in a weird way, in an abstract way. But saying that it was not explored, or that it was not clear, it's not something that I really understand. Again, I can be lenient when a cisgender person says, oh, I didn't really understand it. I didn't really notice that this character was trans, because me, as a cis person, never experienced this kind of things. But me, as a trans person, me, Raphael, as a trans person, did experience some of the things that Jax talked about, and it was pretty obvious to me that she was trans. There are so many things, and I would really like to make a video, like, nitpicking everything and like pointing out everything that in my opinion suggests that Jax is trans from episode 1 to episode 9. I don't know if I'll do that, but I could, because I would like to explore more of her character in this way. Either way, again, for me, it was obvious. I don't really understand, like, a bunch of criticism or like things that people said that I saw is, number one, Jax being F to M would make more sense than Jax being M to F. Why? Like, I really don't understand, okay? Because imagine if a trans male character was completely actualized, he was completely accepted, had a male passing, presenting body, everything, and he was still an asshole. Like, what does that add to his character? I'm not saying that trans people that are fully actualized cannot be assholes. Actually, I do think that we should have more queer people that don't really suffer from a lot of either transphobia or homophobia be assholes. I think that would actually be great, okay? Queer people can be assholes, and they should be portrayed as assholes as well. With that said, I don't think that Jax being a trans man adds anything to to her character in this case, but whatever. I've also seen people say, "Oh, why would she be angry being put in a dress if she was actually a trans woman?" Are you really gonna look me in my eyes and tell me that, in your opinion, someone that feels internalized transphobia would be happy being put in a dress? Like, a trans woman feeling internalized transphobia and misogyny would be happy being put in a dress. Now, again, look in my eyes and tell me this makes sense to you. It does not. Even like, okay, I didn't go through it, but I know a lot of people did. A lot of trans people, before accepting themselves, like a trans man, before accepting himself, goes through a phase where they hyper feminize themselves to try and fit in, to try and be like, I am normal, I am not trans, this is just like a temporary feeling and I can suppress it by dressing hyper feminine. The same thing goes for trans femmes. They can go through a phase, I think it's actually more common, where they're like, I am not a woman, I don't want to be a woman, this is just a feeling that is gonna go away, I just need to, I don't know, train more, I need to build more muscle, I need to be more masculine, I need to get like a very feminine girlfriend, for example, I need to be normal. And again, this is a thing that happens in real life, so in my opinion, it makes complete sense that Jax often emphasize like how masculine he is, how he doesn't want to be put in a dress because he's a real man, how his tail it's that like the pinnacle of masculinity, because he doesn't want to be a trans woman. And this whole internalized trans misogyny that she has is the reason why she ends up dead. I think this actually fades into the next argument pretty well, because I've seen people say that either Jax is trans because he's just a self-insert of Goose works, or to build sympathy, which both things are so stupid in my opinion, because, oh, Jax is trans just because she's a self-insert of Goose works, who's a trans woman. So what? Like, I write so many trans male characters that are not necessarily like a self-insert, but they're a representation of me. One of my main story that I'm writing, it's in Italian by the way, tells a story of this 16 years old trans guy that lives in a small town and just lives his life. And that story specifically was written by me when I was 16 years old to cope with my transphobia, with my dysphoria, with everything that was going on around me. So technically this character, who's called Simone, is a self-insert of me. And yes, he's trans because I am trans. What's the problem there, right? Saying, oh, Jax is only trans because she's a self-insert. So what? Like, does that make her a badly written character because she's a self-insert? You know how many books are built on, like, the basis of having the main character be a self-insert? Have you ever heard of the Divina Commedia? Because I did, right? I really don't understand this argument. The second one is Jax is trans because so like she would be excused of her action. And that's so wrong again, in my opinion, because a character having a sad backstory in any kind of way does not excuse them being an abuser, but it explains their behavior. Plus, Jax being a trans misogynist, is it a word or did I just make it up? Either way, having internalized transphobia and misogyny is the reason why she dies. She is dead at the end of the show because she could not accept herself and could not live her true life as the woman she was supposed to be, right? Or I guess the trans femme person that she was supposed to be. I don't know if it's confirmed that she's a trans woman or just a trans femme, either way. She hid her identity for so long and she couldn't accept herself for so long that she ended up dead. And if we take the interpretation that abstraction is a metaphor for suicide, she died by suicide. I think this specific thing fits a lot for Jack's character in particular, because when she's about, like, when Pomni is talking to her and they're hugging, Jack says, I don't want to go, which is like the feeling of regret after you attempt and like you don't want to die. Like you think back of it and you're thinking, what the fuck did I do? I did this to myself. I don't want to go. which are the words that Jax says before, like, Pomni gets pulled out of the whole obstruction situation. I don't know how to call it. I think that's like the thing that happens, right? Jax kills herself. And she kills herself because she cannot accept that she's a trans woman. I think a big part of the problem in fandoms and shows is that everyone who tries to think outside of the box is immediately shut down by the rest of the fandom, being like, that's just your canon, when maybe it's very obvious. Again, if I say that Owen / Isabel in I Saw the TV Glow is trans, and I hear someone say, well, that's just your canon, maybe, like, I interpret it another way. What do you mean you interpret it another way? Like, what other way could there be? Right? Again, I believe that everyone can interpret things however they want, but when it comes to certain topics, you can't really ignore them, right? You can't say that me interpreting Jax as trans is a headcanon because Jax didn't look into the camera right like this and said, I am a trans woman and I killed myself because I couldn't accept that I am a trans woman. Like, were you expecting something like that? Because if that's how anyone interacts with any kind of media, I feel like the best thing you could do is just watch Bluey, where things are spelled out for you very clearly. Interpretation is part of media literacy, and if you are not able to interpret a whole sequence, maybe you should work on your media literacy. Now, again, I understand if you're cisgender and you don't really understand the feeling because you never experienced the feeling of being trans, of course, because again, you're cisgender. But when cis people come on TikTok, on Twitter, or anything else and demand their not understanding of a show to be taken more seriously than the actual message of the show, I kind of lose it because what am I supposed to do? Like, even after the show, when everything was said and done, and so many people were already saying Jax is trans, and the finale confirmed it was obvious that Jax was trans, and I still heard people be like, no, it's just a headcanon, it's just your interpretation, blah, blah, blah. Everyone came out, like every voice actor came out and said Jax is a trans woman, and everyone's still saying, well, they're just the voice actors, what do they know? And then Gooseworks went ahead and said Jax, if she wasn't an asshole, and it was Jax transitioning into a woman. Even after Goose explicitly stated that Leroy Lee, being Jax in the real world, is a boy mother, which is a trans woman that dresses and presents masculine for safety reasons or because they can't transition medically or socially in any kind of way. After all of those proof, I still see people being like, well, Gooseworks always lies on her profile. Well, Gooseworks is not really truthful. So you're telling me you're gonna take seriously a post where Gooseworks says, I love abusing women, but not a post where she explains that Lee's a boy mother, that Lee would use the name Lee in the real world, a post where she drew Jax as a woman saying if she wasn't an asshole, right? Like, you're gonna take all of that as a joke, but see the I love abusing women post and say, yeah, that's true. It's clearly true, and Gooseworks is admitting that she loves abusing women. Be fucking for real with me. Like, the jokes write themselves. At the end of the day, writing is not endorsement. Writing a trans woman that has internalized trans misogyny and that is an asshole because of that is not endorsing trans women with internalized trans misogyny to be assholes. I've talked many times about, like, fiction does not equal endorsement, like writing does not equal endorsement, and I feel like people don't understand that, so I'll keep repeating it because it's such a simple message that you learn in elementary school. One last critique I found was that Jax is bad representation because she's a trans woman who is violent and is an asshole. Which, again, like, I don't understand this whole thing with characters having to be representative of their community before their characters. If a trans character is a bad person, then they're a bad representation for the trans community. It doesn't work like that, right? Characters and people as well are not representative of their community. If I, as an erased person, say something mean to someone, does not mean that you should see the whole race community as bad. I also want to say that the especially queer people that say, oh, but if we show that the video got muted because the microphone that I was using ran out of battery. Anyway, what I was saying is that the when queer people say that queer representation has to be good so that the cishet accepts us, I think they're brainwashed. Because queer representation is not for cisgender heterosexual people to accept us, it's for other queer people to see themselves in and accept themselves, right? If you create a queer character with the sole purpose of making them palatable to the cisgender heterosexual audience, you're always gonna fail. You're gonna write characters that are one dimensional because they always have to be good and well behaved. They can't be violent, they can't be aggressive, they can't even hate themselves too much, and they always have to be the victim in a situation. They can never be the perpetrator because if they're the perpetrators, you're showing cisgender heterosexual people that we queer people are bad and evil. That's not how you write characters. I said this before already, but like you have to write a character before you write representation. That's how I go about most of my characters. If I'm writing a black characters, I'm not writing a black character. I'm writing a character that happens to be black. Because like I do that because I can't really explore the struggles of black people because I'm not a black person. I can do like explore struggles of queer people as a queer person. But again, you have to write a character before you write representation. Every character should exist as a character before they exist as a gay man or a trans girl or anything else. Jax as representation works, in my opinion, because it shows what happens if you don't accept yourself, if you keep trying to hide yourself and try to fit a mold that was not made for you, try to be in a body that was not made for you, and try to think in a way that was not made for you. You become insufferable, you become an abuser, and you end up killing yourself because you're not happy the way you're living. And that, in my opinion, is good representation, again, of what happens if you don't accept yourself. If you try to be normal while you're actually something else, while you're actually a trans woman or a gay man or anything else. In Jax's case, again, it's her not accepting that she's a trans woman and she would be happier as a trans woman. She would not be as abusive because she wouldn't hate herself so much. Of course, there are a lot of other things. For example, the fact that she doesn't trust people is brought on by her mother that was abusive, and she had like an emotional incestuous relationship with her mother that treated affection in a way to hurt her because, as she said, after berating her, her mother hugged her, which is number one confusing and number two manipulative. So of course Jack sees affection and people trying to help her as a threat because they can always turn around and hurt her. Again, saying that Jax is better representation because she's violent and she abuses women is genuinely brainwashed, in my opinion. Also, because of course there are trans women that are like that, like there are trans men that are like that, and acting like these kind of people don't exist for the sake of good representation is just dumb. Everyone deserves to see themselves in characters, even people that used to be bad. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, I used to be like Jax, I used to be such a bad person, I used to hurt people because I didn't want to get hurt myself, or I used to be mean toward women because I was a trans woman and I did not want to associate myself with them. those are experiences that deserve to be explored as well. And people that went through that or are going through that deserve to see themselves and to realize that either that experience is behind them and they can be better, or that experience that they're experiencing at the moment is not good for themselves and it's not going to end well if they keep this up, if they keep hiding with themselves and being hateful because they're not happy with themselves. So again, queer representation should exist for queer people, not for cis heterosexual people to accept us. Because a real ally is always gonna accept you, no matter if like the community has a bad representation. Okay, if I, as a trans man, are an abuser, and that allows an ally to misgender me, that person was never an ally, because you would not do that to a cisgender person. You're treating my trans identity it as a way to hurt me. You're taking away one of my basic human rights, the right to be recognized as the person I am, because you don't like me. Even not going as far as an abuse, like if I'm mean to someone and that someone misgenders me as like revenge, they were never an ally. They are not a safe person, no matter how many pride events they go to, no matter how uh, much they support their gay best friend, they're not an ally, because a real ally is always going to support the queer community, no matter how they feel regarding a certain queer person or a certain queer character. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, comment, subscribe, leave a like, and of course, if you want, leave your opinion, because I'm reading that. Just be respectful, and we'll see each other in the next video. Bye!